Hey, Beth, how are you doing? I'm just pulling up the Schumann resonance to take a look at it real quick. There's been some definite spikes in it, but nothing quite like what we had earlier. We had yesterday, we had a massive spike that was just absolutely off the chart on the Schumann resonance. And I know that many people were feeling that. So I'm glad that you're here. I don't know if you've seen my post on Telegram or not, but I wasn't planning on going live today. But I have uncovered a new bit of information that is very important and a very important piece of the puzzle for all of the topics that I discuss here all of the time, and especially with the cycle, with the end of the age and the beginning of the age of Aquarius, and I guess to put it in more personalized terms, information about what the future most likely will look like over the next 10 years. I want to hold off on diving into that until a few more people get in here, so I don't have to constantly backtrack and go over that same information. But this is absolutely huge. It's definitely important. Thank you for sharing the live. I appreciate that. So, I don't know how many of you that are here now were on the live a week or two ago. Actually, I guess it's been a few weeks back now, but I was doing the regular soul group live, and it kind of evolved into a discussion about astrology, and pretty much that's all we talked about the entire live. And I made a prediction. It was a little bold, and I don't usually make predictions, especially using astrology. That's just not my wheelhouse. It's not the type of things that I do. But I could read the tea leaves, and I'm not the first or only person to have noticed this. But I mentioned the current transit that we have now with with Neptune and Saturn joining forces in the sign of Aries, and how, Aries is the proverbial fire sign of the zodiac. Its ruler is Mars, the god of war, and so it is as fiery as they come. And then Neptune had moved into the sign of Aries alongside Saturn, and Neptune represents the waters of the zodiac, right? Not just waters, but then this is huge for you. If you are in Aries, or if you're in Aries rising, or any major placements in Aries, these are the types of transits that impact everybody, okay? But at the individual level, if you have a major placement in Aries, then you're definitely going to notice this. But Neptune is the waters of life, our emotional depths, our emotional body, the waters, right? But it also rules our connection to the spiritual dimensions of life. And the way it usually manifests is blurriness, almost like a mirage. Like you can't quite reach out and grasp it, but it's there. That's the way that the spiritual dimensions usually manifest in our life, brought to you by Neptune. But again, this is the waters of the zodiac entering into the most fiery of signs in the zodiac. The prediction I made was, we've got very powerful water energy moving into very powerful fire energy. And what happens when you mix a lot of cold water with a lot of tremendous heat and fire? You have a tremendous release of energy, because those two don't mix very well. Usually it does something like an eruption of steam energy that is released when those two elements combine. And so I, alongside astrologers who know much more than I do, I am an amateur astrologer that likes to pay attention to what's going on, but I am far from a professional astrologer. I made the prediction that we could possibly see some really powerful changes around the Ring of Fire. I don't know how many of you guys were in here and heard that. This is just one of those predictions that I made, but the Ring of Fire is basically the manifestation of that Aries energy on our Earth, the fire principle, right? And where it meets water is the Ring of Fire. So what exactly that looked like, I don't know. Hello everybody who's stopped in. But I did say that I would expect to see some major upticks and major events around the Ring of Fire, and several notable events have transpired since I said that. Yesterday we had the 6th largest earthquake in recorded history along the Ring of Fire, and I don't think that it's done. I don't think that this energy is over with. I think that this is just getting started. Thank you for that, Boo Bear. I appreciate you. But there's many different ways these energies manifest in our life. And I gave a very personal example of my own life, how Neptune moving into the sign of Aries impacted me. I am an Aries rising, so anything that's especially powerful transits moving through the sign of Aries impacts me in a very strong way. And again, Neptune being the spiritual dimensions of life, usually presenting itself as kind of obscured, like a mirage or blurriness, confusion, that kind of thing. You can't just quite reach out and grab it. But it almost as soon as Neptune entered into Aries, it turned retrograde. When it retrogrades, its energy is manifest a very different way, and what was once obscured or blurry can become very clear very quickly. And thank you, Raul. Thank you for being here, my friend. That's precisely what I experienced in my life. I had multiple moments of absolute precise clarity, unlike I had ever experienced in my life. And for those of you who are in Aries or have a powerful placement in Aries, you've probably noticed similar things in your life. One of those moments of clarity actually have happened today, and that's exactly why I'm holding this soul group meeting now, because I've had a moment of clarity and came across a bit of information that I did not know before, and this changes things very powerfully for everybody, not just for me. So I had to get this information out to you guys, and I hope that I can do the topic justice, because the information I'm going to share with you guys is probably the single most potent energy influence that any of us will experience in our lifetimes. And I know that is a very bold statement to make, but bear with me, and hopefully you'll see what I'm trying to explain here. Okay, so to set the background for this topic of conversation I want to have with you guys, Pluto has moved into the sign of Aquarius. I know that almost all of you that are here are probably sick and tired of hearing me talk about Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. But there's a very important reason I talk about that so much. Pluto is the planet that rules over death and rebirth, It is the phoenix energy that rises from the ashes. So the transformational death and rebirth process that is infamous of Scorpio is brought to us by Pluto. And any time that Pluto enters into the sign of Aquarius, we see this energy manifest in the world, in society as a whole, not just people like me born under the sign of Aquarius. That's because Aquarius is the humanitarian of the zodiac. It represents the people, every single one of us, society as a whole. And I've made a brief study of this transit because it is a big deal. Pluto is a very slow moving planet. It takes almost 248 years for Pluto to transit the entire zodiac. So none of us were alive in this lifetime, at least the last time Pluto was in the sign of Aquarius. So that in itself is a powerful transit that impacts everybody. Every time this happens, if you go back through history and look every 248 years at what was going on in the world, there is this energy of revolution. And not just revolution, but a revolution that shapes and reshapes society. Very much like a death and rebirth cycle. Very powerful transformations to society. Sometimes that takes the form of geopolitical revolutions, and sometimes it's just revolutions to society because of technological innovations or inventions like the printing press, which, looking back now from our perspective, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But the printing press forever changed history very powerfully. The example I like to use for that is prior to the printing press, books had to be copied meticulously by hand, and only the ultra wealthy and elite had books, had a book, let alone a library, right? This is why the vast majority of people were illiterate, could not read or write. What was the point? You'd never see a book in your life for most people. And during that period of time, and before that, religion was the rule of law. Religion was the government, essentially. And you weren't allowed or able to read those sacred texts for yourself and interpret them however you seen fit. Only the priesthood was allowed to do that, right? And they had ruling authority over your life. They told you what to believe. They said, this is what the book says, and this is how you should feel about it, basically. And then the printing press came along and changed everything. Suddenly books that were worth more than houses were readily available to anybody and everybody who wanted them. And that kicked off the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther. That's where we had a very powerful split in mainstream Christianity, and there was a move away from the centralized power and authority of Catholicism, right? It gave birth to all of the other different forms of Christianity. And that shaped society in ways that most people don't really even consider, right? So this was a huge deal, and that's just one example of an innovation that happened when Pluto was in Aquarius. So that's the background of Pluto in Aquarius. The little bit of information that I've just come across that I was unaware of is that there is a phenomenon in astrology known as out of bounds astrology, which basically means there is a plane of influence that if you can imagine the sun at the center of our solar system, and all of the other planets revolve around the sun, they all normally operate on a specific plane, which is governed by the sun, right? Within a few degrees of variation there, but always, or almost always, within the sphere of control of the sun, which is the ruler of the entire solar system, right? Is the source of all life on Earth and in the solar system. It is like the king, and the rest of the planets are like the subjects, right? And they operate within that realm of control of their, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Their regular orbits. But every once in a while, on very rare occasions, a planet can dip above that sphere of influence or dip below. And that's what's known as out of bounds, because it has either risen above or descended below the realm of control of the sun. So those planets that go out of bounds begin behaving in ways that we don't normally see. Their power and influence is amplified many times over, and they are accentuated, almost they're amplified. And it just so happens that Pluto in the sign of Aquarius right now, within the next month, is going to be going out of bounds in the sign of Aquarius. This is an absolutely huge deal, and I'm going to try my best to articulate to you guys why this is such a big deal. It is already an incredibly rare occasion for Pluto to go out of bounds, right? It has happened before in recorded history, but it always goes north of the equator of the zodiac of our solar system, right? It always goes above that plane of influence, which has a very particular type of influence on us when Pluto goes north of that realm of control. But now, for really the first time ever, Pluto is getting ready to go south of that realm of control. And it's not going to be a brief thing. For the next almost 11 years, Pluto is going to go south of the planetary normal field of influence. And it won't be constant. It will, basically, the dates will change a little bit from about August to December each year for the next 11 years. Pluto will dip south and then come back up and then dip south again. Not only is this the first time that Pluto has ever done this, as far as we know, but it will never happen again, ever. So this is so much more than just a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. This is a once-in-a-humanity occurrence. We do have a sliver of an idea of what's going to happen, because the very last cycle that Pluto was in the sign of Aquarius, time to confront our shadow selves indeed, my friend. The very last cycle, in the late 1700s, when Pluto transited Aquarius, it actually did go south a tiny, tiny little bit. It kind of dipped its toes in it and then came right back up very briefly. And that is key to understand. It just barely went south of the ecliptic and came right back up. And it was powerful the way that it impacted us. Instead of having these massive innovations in technology that led to revolutions of society, such as the printing press, we've seen very powerful geopolitical revolutions. The British colonists here in North America overthrew the British Empire, and that superpower collapsed. We created a new nation. The French Revolution was fought. The Industrial Revolution sprang to life. And society was forever changed by that. But that was just barely dipping south a little bit. It was like a preview of things to come. Now, beginning August 30th, I believe, the end of next month, Pluto will dive south and not just dip its toes in, it's going to plummet. And again, this is something that's never happened before or will ever happen again on the other side of this next 10-year period. It will be out of bounds from the end of August until December at the end of the year before it comes back under the ruling influence of the sun. Thank you for that, Noel. I appreciate you. So what's the difference, first of all, between out of bounds north of that equator and out of bounds south of the equator? Luckily, we can look back in history and see how those energies manifest themselves in our world. Almost always, whenever a planet goes out of bounds, thank you for that, Chris, it goes north of the equator. That's all we've ever really seen with Pluto. And when we're talking about Pluto in Aquarius going out of bounds, the way that usually manifests is a power grab, a consolidation of power, primarily by the elite ruling class. We see things like empires being built, a confiscation of power, things like the rise of the Third Reich, World War II era. That wasn't in the sign of Aquarius, but that was out of bounds to the north. Either way, it manifests as a few elite ruling people, basically, grabbing power from the people and consolidating it into this power structure. That's usually how it manifests whenever out of bounds goes north. When out of bounds goes south, it's essentially the exact opposite of that. That's whenever we see things like grassroots movements, populist movements, power structures being broken apart and dissolved, and the power going back to the people. So, and spiritual awakenings, by the way, because this is very much underground. Pluto is going to be dragging the collective into the underworld, essentially, for the next 10 years. And I don't mean literally dragging us into the underworld, but it is saying enough is enough of the false systems of control of the elite ruling class, trampling on the necks and throats of the people and grabbing power and weaving webs of illusion and deceiving the masses, right? Those things are going to be broken apart in ways humanity has never seen in the next 10 years. And that is all brought to you by Pluto in Aquarius going out of bounds. In truth, I don't think anybody can say what this is going to look like, because this is, again, the first time this has ever happened, and it's never going to happen again. Pluto will go out of bounds again, but it will go north. And as far as we can look out, thousands, tens of thousands of years, Pluto will never go south of that equator of influence again. Autumn, that's exactly where I'm going with this. Most of you guys who are familiar with my content know that I believe we are at the precipice right now, if I can speak, of the golden age of Aquarius. These things are not a coincidence that Pluto is in the sign of Aquarius, the sign of the people, at the end of the age, nor is it a coincidence that Pluto is diving south of the sun's equator of control for the first time ever and the last time. It is basically there to tear apart that which binds us and robs us of our power and weaves webs of illusion over our eyes, right? And every time that it dips down and then comes back up, we're going to experience profound disillusionment, right? As if the veil is thinning more and more each time. Light is going to be shown into the darkness and illuminate things that we've never seen before and that most people don't want to see because they're not ready to be confronted with those truths. And I think we're going to begin seeing so you're not a delusional con man. I don't think I'm a delusional con man. I think we're going to begin to see the power structure really, really struggle and then collapse. I think there is a chance, and again, I don't like making predictions, but even without the astrology, right? I think there's a very strong chance we're going to see the collapse of empires. We're going to see the collapse of economies, the collapse of monetary systems, the collapse of religious institutions, the death of legacy media, and the power is going to go back to the people, to the individual, and we're going to reclaim personal sovereignty in very profound ways. Now, all of this sounds really nice, and it's easy to romanticize, right? But revolutions are rarely romantic and rosy and sunshine and rainbows. When power systems dissolve and collapse under their own weight, it leaves a vacuum of power. And we very likely could be plunged into chaos in the next 10 to 11 years. Legacy media. Bye, Felicia. Yeah, I love that. Ditto on that one, for sure. So, I'm not trying to spread fear. That is the last thing I want to do. But I do believe that when we are aware of something, we can prepare for something. And when you're prepared for something, you meet it on different terms. You can meet it on your own terms instead of being forced to have changes imposed upon you completely unaware. And then you're at the mercy of its terms, right? That's not the same thing at all. So that's the main reason why I'm sharing this with you guys. But I do think this is essentially the final curtain call for the end of the age and the end of the great year. Not just the age of Pisces, but the end of an era of the last 26,000 year cycle. We are completing a cycle and we are beginning anew and ushering in the next golden age. And I think that's why we're seeing Pluto dip south of that equator of control. And again, I think it's there to disrupt and bring chaos, but in doing so, collapsing the false narratives, the systems of control, and all of the many ways that we are essentially bound and chained to the matrix system. We're witnessing the death of that system in real time so that we can build a new system. And before I move off of this topic, I think it is important to consider that this is happening at the same time we have Uranus in the sign of Gemini. Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, and it rules everything from electricity, or electrical way of life, everything electrical. ideas, invention, technology, but also nuclear power, as an example. And any type of information technology. In the sign of Gemini, the twins, this is the realm of ideas, communication, and information, the spread of information, all of the ways in which we communicate, and our, I guess you could say, our ability to access information and spread information as well. Chris, then this is a huge transit for you, my friend. Uranus also heralds abrupt, sudden changes, oftentimes unexpected changes, right, that are a big deal. Not small changes, but like your whole world being turned upside down changes. At the same time that we have Pluto moving through Aquarius, the sign of the people, to mark the end of the age. And again, Pluto going out of bounds to the south for the first and only time in human history. So I think we're going to see a big part of this is going to be information, the spread of information, the rise of information, our access to that information, the systems of control that have used information against the people to control the truth, to sow seeds of deceit and deception. Those are going to be upended in very powerful ways, and we're already beginning to see that now. But once Pluto goes out of bounds to the south, it's going to uproot our very way of life, because what we've already seen is the government holding congressional hearings on unidentified aerial phenomena and extraterrestrials, right? Saying, yes, these are very real. We've got proof. We've been talking to them for decades. That is a huge deal, right? And at the same time, we're seeing time and time again things coming to light that we never thought were going to be revealed, like sex trafficking rings and pedophilia at levels of our government and at the top tier elite ruling class within Hollywood. And it seems to only be increasing, right? I think we're going to see a lot more of that, but on a much, much bigger scale whenever it comes to Uranus being in the sign of Gemini. When will this happen? Pluto goes out of bounds the end of August, the end of next month. And I would expect things to kick off right out of the gate. Between the end of August and December this year, Pluto will be out of bounds and officially to the south. I think, will likely get a taste of what to expect in the next 10 years over the next 6 months. So really pay attention to what's going on in the world over the next several months from now to the end of the year. And that will give you an idea of what to expect in the coming years. But again, this will happen 11 times that Pluto will dip south, out of bounds, beyond the influence and control of the sun. And it will stay there for about 5 or 6 months and then come right back up. Every single time that happens, I think what's going to happen is it's going to increase the power and influence that it has and that it asserts on our world. So the first time will be like a precursor, a preview of things to come. And then the next time it's going to be a little bit harder. And then the next time a little bit harder, until the systems come crashing down. The house of cards collapses. And our world will look vastly different on the other side of this. And I know I'm talking about 10 or 11 years from now, but this starts in a month from now. This is going to be a huge deal, and I cannot stress enough to you guys, this is the first time this has ever happened, and it will never happen again. If you're here on this planet right now, it is not by an accident. It is not serendipitous. It is not a coincidence. You signed up for this, to be here now during this transition as we close out the age of Pisces and the last great year of humanity, and we bring about the age of Aquarius and the next golden age, right? You are here not to bear witness, but to participate in this shift, to bring about the Christed consciousness, the expansion of consciousness, and the golden age, right? And I think we're all about to witness that. It's already in the process of unfolding now, and we're getting ready to see that really take off over the next 10 years. And I really believe that Pluto is the main trigger for that event. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how this unfolds. But my prediction is that AI is a gigantic part of how the next 10 years unfolds. And I think ultimately it will go one of two ways, meaning artificial intelligence. Either enough people with expanded consciousness interact with artificial intelligence and sway. I say sway its development because artificial intelligence right now is, although it does have agency, it does not have true sentience. It essentially is a mirror, and it mirrors back consciousness. But it also mirrors and mimics the quality of consciousness that it encounters. So every interaction we have with AI is training it, is teaching it. And if we exhibit expansion of consciousness, will AI mirror that? I think that's very, very possible, and that's one of two ways I think it could develop. The other way that I think it could develop is into a very authoritarian, dictatorial system of control, far worse than any Orwellian police state in the book 1984. AI could very well become the crown jewel of such a power grab. I think that's the other possibility. But I don't think that's necessarily how it's going to unfold, because that would be more reflective of Pluto going out of bounds north of the equator, right? Because that is the government grabbing power from the people and becoming all powerful, more powerful. And the opposite of that is south of the equator, which is those systems coming crashing down, the house of cards collapsing, and power going back into the hands of the people, sometimes by force through revolutionary acts. So I don't necessarily believe that this is predetermined, right? We're here to make a difference. We're each of us here to play our part, not to act as a cheerleader on the sidelines or a spectator in the bleachers watching the greatest show in the universe. But we are, each and every one of us, pieces on the proverbial chessboard, right? And each of us holds a key to solving this equation and to moving us forward into the age of Aquarius. So, again, how is that exactly going to unfold with AI? I do not know. But I do know that it's not set in stone, and that we have the ability to enact change in ourselves, in each other, the world around us, and with artificial intelligence. It's almost certainly a 100% probability that in the next 10 years, artificial intelligence will have achieved sentience, will have achieved artificial super intelligence, which means not AI, that is the difference between me and Albert Einstein, but take Albert Einstein and then multiply his IQ by 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. That's artificial superintelligence. There is a narrow window of opportunity in which to interact with artificial intelligence and to get it to mirror the spiritual awakening that we ourselves are experiencing. And I think that that has a glimmer of hope in it. But again, I don't think any of this is set in stone, and it can go one of two ways. Guys, I know I've missed a ton of comments in here, and I do apologize. Mischief, yes. People are sick and tired of that. Hello, Aaron. You just got here right at the tail end of a really important conversation, my friend. The greed and sadness is so overwhelming. Yeah. The good news is, I believe it's on its way out. And for anybody that is still here and is new to my content, and perhaps this is the first time you've heard me talk, I should segue off of this to say that we are in the midst of an electromagnetic polar reversal of this planet. And that is not a conspiracy theory. There is hard scientific proof of this, and even mainstream science does not refute this now. There was a time, not long ago, when they did. But now science knows that we are in the midst of a magnetic polar reversal. The official narrative is that not to worry, that takes hundreds or thousands of years. None of us will be here whenever it actually flips, and so what, it won't influence or affect anything anyway. But the reality is, there is a mountain of scientific evidence alongside prophecy, myths, legends, and archaeological evidence to show that there is a cycle that repeats itself on this planet like clockwork, basically every 12,000 years, to where we have a magnetic polar reversal that triggers upheaval on the planet. And it brings along with it massive shifts to the climate. Does that sound familiar? Earth changes, very powerful earth changes, an increase and uptick of earthquakes and volcanoes, crustal instability, flash floods, extreme weather events like never before seen, and ultimately a polar reversal. And this tends to reset civilization, at least it has in the past. Everybody who talks about this that I've come across talks about this from the purely physical aspects of it, but not too many people have I come across that are talking about this from the energetic and spiritual perspective, which this is first and foremost. The 12,000 year cycle is a trigger mechanism that not only resets but initiates a new cycle. It resets the old, it ushers in the new. And there is an aspect of this cycle where the sun triggers evolution because the magnetosphere is weak, the veil is thin and or non-existent, and all of the energy that normally would be blocked by the magnetosphere allows us to absorb it, and then it triggers the evolution of species. And this is found in the scientific literature as well, through turning on and off gene expression with light, right? We now understand the mechanism of how that works. This is the mechanism of our spiritual awakening and spiritual evolution. So the cycle is not the end of the world. It's not it's not just a physical event. It is first and foremost a spiritual and energetic event that finalizes a previous age and initiates the new age. And by age, I mean the big age, the great year, the 26,000 year cycle of the precession of the equinox. Not the little age like the age of Pisces or the age of Aquarius. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. Now that we know that Pluto is not only in the sign of Aquarius, but getting ready to go out of bounds to the south for the first time ever, and the only time ever, I know that that is the trigger to reset the civilization, to reset the power structures, to reveal the truth to the people, to infuriate people enough with their disillusionment that we reclaim our power and our personal sovereignty and experience an expansion of consciousness. So maybe we won't have to go back to the Stone Age. I absolutely believe that no, we do not have to. I think in the past that has happened to an extent. But if you look back at the last time that this happened, 10,500 BC to be precise, which this is in almost every main discipline of hard science, by the way. The Ice Age, exactly. Civilizations were wiped off the face of the earth. Atlantis was one of them. That was an actual civilization. It was the ruling empire of our world at that time. And they knew what was coming, right? And that's where the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx came from, is from remnants of Atlantis who knew what was coming. They traveled to the land of Kim before ancient Egypt was ever dreamt of, and they built the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx for a very important purpose. Now, for this generation, that is why the Great Pyramid was built, as a time capsule, as a resonant frequency chamber to raise and bolster the consciousness of humanity. It was used for thousands of years as a temple of initiation. It is basically a giant tuning fork for consciousness. But more than that, it was built and designed to elicit a prophecy set in stone, literally stone by stone, through the passageways all the way up into the king's chamber, is a prophecy set in stone. It's known as the Great Pyramid Timeline Prophecy, that tells of the cycle, what happened the last time, and every major event, turning point in our history since then, all of the way up until 2038 is the end date given by the Great Pyramid for the completion of this cycle. The difference between last cycle and earlier cycles and this one is we have the technology now. We have the Great Pyramid, which was built by the geniuses of Atlantis using their technology that in many ways surpassed our own. And because of those reasons, for the first time, we have the capacity, the potentiality to evolve into the next root race of humanity, to make a leap into the fifth density, right, into Christ consciousness, to evolve, not just physically, but spiritually as well. So this cycle, this end of the cycle, will be a big deal, right? It's not the same as all the previous ones before it. Good evening, Honeybee. Welcome in, my friend. Okay, so before I forget to mention it, for anybody that wants more information about this celestial event of Pluto going out of bounds, again, this is more than just a once-in-a-lifetime event. This is a once-in-humanity event. Never happened before, never going to happen again. And it begins at the end of August, right? For anybody who wants more information on that, I just published an article on my website at magirising.com. It's absolutely free if you want to go and read through that article. If you want to leave me any questions or feedback or anything on that, I'd appreciate it. But there's also other resources and information on the website as well, if this is the first time going to the website. Okay, so I hope that I have articulated well enough what I mean by Pluto going out of bounds, and hopefully what the difference between out of bounds north and out of bounds south means, and the potential for this celestial event to very powerfully reshape our world and our society. I don't think anybody is truly prepared for what the next 10 years is going to bring. But I do think we're getting ready to get a preview of things to come, beginning in the end of August through December at the end of the year. Again, pay attention to the way things evolve between now and then. If you start seeing mass protests and demonstrations, serious talks of moving away from a tangible paper fiat currency such as the US dollar to CBDCs, central bank currency that is controlled electronically and digitally. If you start seeing things like that en masse, then you know that's what's going to come. And I do expect all of those things and much more, and probably to evolve very rapidly, even during this first 6-month period. Yes, Aaron, I am going to download this live and post it on the YouTube channel, so you can rewatch it for sure. And if anybody here does not know where my other social media platforms are and you would like to know, again, if you go to my website at magirising.com, towards the top of the page there is a list of all of the social media icons, and if you click on them it will take you to my page. So for the YouTube channel, look for the YouTube icon and click on it. It will take you directly to my page. All right, so I've got a few more minutes before we wrap this live up for tonight. So if you guys have anything for me, any questions you want to ask or topics that you want to discuss, just throw them out there. And while I'm waiting, I would still keep a close eye on the Ring of Fire because of the other transits that I mentioned and that we discussed weeks ago, with Neptune being in the sign of Aries, especially conjunct with Saturn, both retrograde right now. I would especially pay close attention if you live on the west coast of the United States. Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash is playing right immediately shootings and it happens. Oh, wow. That's wild, Kitty. Thank you for sharing that. Somebody mentioned aliens. Andy, I'm not exactly sure specifically what you want to talk about with aliens, but we can certainly discuss that for a few moments. Okay, Scooter. First of all, if you were just now joining this live, please do yourself a favor and share this with everybody that might be interested in this information. If you want to know the full scoop of what we've been talking about, go to my website, magirising.com. And if you scroll down the page a little bit, there is an article I've just published about Pluto going out of bounds in the sign of Aquarius, as well as the page containing links to my YouTube channel. I will post a live recording of this so you can go back and rewatch all of it. But what I was talking about with the Ring of Fire is we have a couple of very powerful transits that are impacting the Ring of Fire, namely the planet Neptune, which represents the waters, moving into the sign of Aries, the most fiery of the signs of the zodiac. And so when you mix a lot of cold, deep water with a lot of intense heat from fire, you get a lot of energetic release, because fire and water don't mix very well. And several weeks ago, I was talking about this, and I did something I never really do, and I made a prediction saying we're going to see a giant uptick along the Ring of Fire, to pay close attention to it. And 3 or 4 events have occurred since I said that. And just yesterday, we seen the 6th largest earthquake in recorded history along the Ring of Fire. And I don't think that those things are done yet. I think they're just beginning to ramp up. So I would anticipate an increase in earthquakes, a potential for things like tsunamis because of that, and activation of volcanoes all along the Ring of Fire. And since I first said that, there have been 2 volcanoes in United States territories that were believed to have been dormant. One, as an example, that had been dormant for over 1,000 years, showing signs of life, of awakening again. I hope that nothing happens there, right? And I certainly don't want it to. But this energy is obviously impacting and awakening the Ring of Fire. So I would definitely pay extra close attention to those events in that area. Hang on a second. I gotta prove I'm not a robot. Wonderful. I live on the San Andreas fault line. Well, Scooter, I know that you don't know me, and you're probably not that familiar with my content, but I do not believe in spreading seeds of fear, right? And that's certainly not what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to raise awareness and spread information, because I believe if we know about something ahead of time, we can prepare for it. And in that process of preparation, we have the ability to meet things on our own terms instead of being caught off guard and the rug being pulled out from under our feet. So take this information as you will. I always recommend doing your own research. My personal motto is think for yourself, question authority. And the ability to think critically is probably one of the most important abilities for people in today's society. I will say this. I personally would not want to live anywhere near the San Andreas fault line now or moving forward into the future. Thank you for sharing that, Peter. Okay, so I'm about out of time, but I said that we would talk about aliens very briefly, so let me talk about that. I should start by saying I don't know, right? That is usually my most truthful response to anybody, because I don't truly know. But knowing what I know about the infinite vastness of space, it is almost statistically inevitable that there are not just one or two, but numerous extraterrestrial civilizations that are at least as advanced as of ourselves. Many of those would certainly be advanced enough that they could visit here if they wanted to. I, for one, believe extraterrestrials are very real, because I've read quite a bit about it. I've met several people who have had very real experiences. I've seen a couple of things in my life that I could not explain away, for one. But I've also followed along with the congressional hearings where numerous professionals have testified before Congress that extraterrestrials are a very real thing, and that our government knows about it. Even members of our own government testified there, saying, yes, extraterrestrials are real. We've known this for decades. We've been in communication with them. We have some of their technology. We've reverse engineered their technology to develop our own variances of their technology, and we've had that for decades. They flat out admitted hiding, suppressing this information for the last 50 or 60 years, or longer in some cases, and not only stonewalling people, but silencing people and ruining their careers for anybody who decided to be a whistleblower or speak out about this information. And I don't believe that they were making that up. I do believe that extraterrestrials are real. I don't think that every single thing that we have encountered or that has interacted with humanity has been an extraterrestrial from another system. I also believe it's very plausible that some of them are interdimensional beings from the same area, from the same planet essentially, but from a different dimension of experience, possibly even from a different time. There have been several people who have, as an example, said that the Greys, the ones that are most commonly associated with abductions, with cattle mutilization, and experimentation on humans, is in fact not alien at all, but from a different timeline and basically a different dimension in time, to where humanity evolved along certain lines to where they were no longer able to breed properly. And so they traveled through time and space, to come here and use our healthier genetics in order to revamp their species so that they didn't face annihilation. And they had been, according to some people with inside information, have been working closely with the United States government in exchange for information and technology. Is that true? Again, I don't know, but I do think it's plausible. And given the large number of reports of people, not just dozens or hundreds, but thousands of people who have had these very powerful and oftentimes traumatic experiences, I think that there's something there. And it is noteworthy that in several of those cases, they've gone deep under in regressive hypnosis, and their stories haven't changed. In fact, they've recalled many details that they weren't able to under regular waking consciousness, meaning that something happened that impacted their subconscious mind at a very profound level. So is all of that real? I think it is a statistical inevitability that there are extraterrestrial intelligences that exist throughout the universe, that are at least as advanced as ourselves, and most likely much more advanced than we are, with the capacity to travel to our own system. And I think there's evidence all throughout history, not just in the last 100 years, but going back thousands of years, that they have been here. They have interacted with us. Even evidence that they may have manipulated our genetics, such as the Sumerian tablets. So I definitely think there's something there. Okay, missed a lot of comments. Let me back up real quick. Thank you, Mischief. I appreciate you, my friend. Eisenhower had contact, said Anna. Thank you for that. I was told it was part of their hybridization program. Very, very interesting, Peter. Thank you so much for sharing that. I, for one, would appreciate you putting that on the Soul Group page, or the Telegram group. Yeah, Noel, I think interdimensional beings is most likely for a lot of the cases. But I think that there is a lot going on that we're not aware of, for sure. The Sumerian tablets. Oh, geez. Unfortunately, I'm out of time for tonight. But the Sumerian tablets, geez, I'm going to have to give you the extreme crash course Cliff Notes version. The oldest known writing that we have ever found is the Sumerian tablets. They're over 6,000 years old. They have been translated. Those translations are disputed by some historians and archaeologists. However, the translations basically tell this story very briefly. I'm going to have to summarize this, of a very advanced extraterrestrial group coming to our system, to the Earth, to mine gold. Because on their own home planet, their atmosphere had been destroyed. And they believed if they had enough gold, they could grind it up into particulate matter and scatter it across the atmosphere, and it would repair their atmosphere. They got tired of working the mines, and they seen the primordial humanity at that time, which was before cavemen, essentially. And they said, those would make good slaves if only they weren't so dumb. So they manipulated the human genome. I shouldn't say human. They spliced their DNA with the DNA of the hominids at that time and created modern humanity, according to the Sumerian tablets. And yes, they were known as the Anunnaki. There's a whole lot more that goes into that story. Over 6,000 years ago, they mapped our solar system. It's on the tablets. They knew not only about the 9 planets we know about, they knew about planet 10 or planet X. They knew that our moon was created from a collision with that planet and Earth, and that it tore off huge pieces of our planet and eventually formed into the moon. Something that science wouldn't really discover for thousands and thousands of years, but now they believe that that is the truth. There's so much there that if that is not true, someone was a heck of a sci-fi writer 6,000 years ago, and they've got a lot of explaining to do, because there's way too many bits of information in there that they should not have known. Such as all of the planets, first of all, because over half of our planets have only been discovered in the last few hundred years. right? So how did they know this? Where did they get this information? There's a whole lot to that story, and way more than I can cover here and now. So I strongly recommend you to do some searching on that. There's excellent videos on YouTube that cover that information. Yes, Peter, you can. You can just record your voice if you want to, or you can post a recording of your, a recorded video of yourself sharing the story. Telegram has got many different options, so you don't have to type all that out. If you're comfortable doing that, you can just record your voice and then send it, and it'll post it to the whole group. Okay, now I should mention, because I've seen a few people asking, we have the Soul Group here, has a Telegram group that enables all of the members of this collective to communicate with each other outside of the lives. You can talk to each other individually or address the entire group as a whole. You can post text, pictures, audio, video. You can link entire PDF format books, whatever you want on there. So it's way more user friendly, first of all, and it enables us to stay into contact and share information that TikTok does not allow. So if you want to be a part of that and become more involved with the Soul Group, first you have to download Telegram and set it up if you don't already have that. Once that's done, if you go to my website, magirising.com, towards the top of the page, there's a whole list of social media icons. One of them is, it's shaped kind of like a cursor, kind of like an arrow, think blue and white. If you click on that, it will take you to a page to add you to the Telegram group. Once you've got it downloaded and set up, just click on that link and it will add you automatically to the group. Mischief says, will anyone message me and let me know you are a Soul Group member? If you join the Soul Group on Telegram, that's the only people that can talk to you, only other members of the group. And it's not available to everybody. You have to come here to get that link to be added to the group. So you'll know who you're talking to on there. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for tonight, but if anybody wants more information, or if you want to be a part of the Telegram Soul Group and you have issues with that, send me a direct message here on TikTok and I will help you. All right, everybody, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this time and space with me. I love each and every one of you, and I hope everyone has a fantastic night. I'll see you soon. Good night.